new. They are not new. But we always have to be reminded for implementing what we have promised. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Sylvia Earle, I would like to ask you the same question. When you were young, is this the future you dream on?
Well, first, let me say what an honor it is to be with this panel of my heroes, people who have made history. And as my fellow explorer in residence at the National Geographic, Zahi Hawass, who's the director of the pyramids, what a title, or has been anyway, says, if you do not know your past, you cannot know your future. And here we are reflecting on our past. And I have to say, if IUCN did not exist, we'd have to invent it. Because here's an organization that really does what needs to be done. The structure is in place, organizing representatives from most of the governments of the world, organizing, providing a framework within which the NGOs of the world, it's close to 1,000, have a place where their voices can be heard, where they can meet with others who share ideas and have a vision of a better future. And we don't have to invent it, it's here. And I've had the great pleasure of being a part of the action, starting really in the 1970s, before some of you in this room were born. Come on. And I have a particularly interesting perspective because for one reason or another, I got to be on the board of World Wildlife Fund, US. And then within a couple of years, I was on the board of World Wildlife International. And at the same time, during that same era, I was elected to be one of the counselors of IUCN. So I made a lot of trips back and forth from where I was, mostly in the US, to Geneva, and watched the process whereby the individuals who are here and many who are not here really shaped what we have today in terms of trying to figure out how do those of us who really seem to have deeply in our DNA, I suppose, a caring for nature and understanding that nature is not an option, it's not a luxury, it's the world, it's everything, it's the fundamental, as you point out. It's not humans here, nature there, we are nature, nature is us, we are an extension of all that has preceded the present time. We are the distillation of 4.5 billion years. We are stardust. We are, as Ed Wilson has pointed out in his most recent book about the social nature of humankind. What's the name of the book? It's the social conquest of Earth. Well, of course, he's an ant man, Ed Wilson is, and he sees social creatures in the insect world that have been around for a long time. I mean, like hundreds of millions of years. And they have, in a sense, conquered the world in a way. They certainly have made themselves widely distributed. But the astonishing swiftness of our conquest of the planet, really seriously beginning perhaps 11,000 years ago, and how we have drawn on and been able to store the knowledge over thousands of generations and draw upon it. There are a lot of smart creatures on the planet that we share space with. And think about elephants and dolphins, whales, cats, dogs, a lot of birds with rare intelligence. They may, in fact, anticipate the future. I mean, they must, in some degree. They may reflect on the past, but none have the benefit that humans have, of the social structure that has enabled us to draw on the great wisdom as well as the knowledge that goes back over not just centuries, but thousands of years. Abe Wilson points out our ability to harness fire as one of the key elements that gives us an edge that dolphins can't enjoy. But whatever it is, here we are at what I think of as the sweet spot in time. I have friends, well, two of them are known as Doctors Doom and Dr. Doom and Dr. Gloom. This is Nancy Knowlton, who's a great friend and a great biologist at the Smithsonian Institution, oceanographer. And Jeremy Jackson, they just happen to be married. And they have contributed much to the knowledge of the ocean, but they are really depressed because they see what anybody who looks around today can see about the ocean, about the world generally. Half the coral reefs are gone or in a state of decline since IUCN came along. IUCN is, but for IUCN, the numbers would be worse, no doubt about it. IUCN is through the Species Survival Commission, through the working groups, through the network of science, what has been accomplished with this organization, working with nearly 1,000 NGOs, most significantly in the earlier days, and still, World Wildlife Fund was critical to the survival of the Species Survival Commissions and other aspects of it, and still a good, close relationship. So, looking at the decline of so much, there are hundreds of dead zones around the world in the ocean. The loss of sharks and other large fish, 90% of some species are gone in my lifetime. Well, actually in 50 years, some of them in only 30 years. We have the capacity to kill, to destroy, but we also have the capacity to think about the consequences and take action. We had the power in the 1940s, in the 50s and 60s, and we certainly have it today, to eliminate every last whale. But we stopped. In 1986, we put our attacks on whales on hold, for the most part. Now there are some nations still taking whales. By and large, humans across the world have said there's a value here that transcends pounds of meat. We don't need whales to survive for food. We're getting there with respect to ocean wildlife across the board. If we are dependent on fish from the sea, then we better give up, because the fact is, with 90% of many of them already gone, we're not going to survive with wildlife from the sea. We have used to commodify birds and take them by the ton to eat. We gave it up. Mostly we don't eat wild birds anymore. Most of the protein that people consume comes from those animals that we cultivate. I'm told on the order of 80% of the calories we consume come from 4 kinds of plants: corn, rice, wheat, soy. And of the calories of animals that we consume, 13% of the calories come from animals. 1% come from ocean creatures. Half of that comes from those that we cultivate. And they're mostly freshwater, not ocean, aquatic creatures. Only 0.5% now provide calories that people consume. And we had this illusion we're going to feed ourselves from the sea, going back 62 years ago. We know that's not realistic anymore. That the value of a fish alive far transcends the value of a fish dead, just as we came to understand that about whales. Trees, board feet of lumber, used to be the main way that we valued trees. Now we look at trees with new eyes. That's a dramatic change from 50, 60 years ago. Trouble is, policies were established in the 50s and 60s based on what we didn't know now. The sweet spot in time is because now we know. Now we understand that we can change the nature of nature. We are driving climate change. We are really a force of nature. We have the power to destroy ourselves. Ed Wilson again says we're letting nature slip through our fingers, but the real concern is having ourselves slip through nature's fingers. We have the power to undermine the very capacity of the planet to support us. Now we know that. We didn't know that 50 years ago. I mean, I was part of panels about food from the sea. Our job was to go take, find new ways to capture, find capture market. Even as late as 1980, we're finding ways to find new markets for an underutilized species of sharks. Now we know we have to save sharks. Healthy reefs need sharks, and sharks need healthy reefs. And now we know that there's a value beyond looking at wild creatures as commodities. So, now we know. What we couldn't know. I went down, I hope all of you have been into the pavilion where all these displays are being shown. The National Geographic has one. NASA, it was the NASA exhibit that really caught my eye. Because there is, in this little small space, they have drawn in the distillation of remarkable things that no one could anticipate 50 years ago, 62 years ago for sure. That we now have the ability to track and demonstrate to a kid and carry this information around on a little cell phone in your pocket to show how the polar ice has disappeared in the last 30 years. It's documented. You could look at it. You can see how sea level has changed because there are the records from technology that didn't exist when I was a kid. Satellites up in the sky. We had that view of Earth from space that didn't exist when IUCN was formed. Imagine the vision that was required at that time to anticipate, or maybe not even anticipate, couldn't anticipate where we are today. But to know that we needed to get together and do something, to have a forum like this forum, where you can pull together the best and the brightest of people who care about where we've come from, and most importantly, where are we going? And this is the time. We could not know what we now know until about this point in time. That's why it's the sweet spot. And if you wait another 50 years, another 62 years, it will be too late to take actions. But we now have the option to exercise. We can stop killing ocean wildlife that we really don't need to consume for calories. We're subsidizing the killing of wild creatures on the order of $5 billion a year loss for supporting unsustainable extraction of ocean wildlife. According to Bob Zoellick, who spoke at the World Economic, he spoke at the Economist Forum in Singapore about the ocean, pointing out that we subsidize the killing of ocean wildlife on the order of $25 billion a year, maybe as much as $50 billion, but on the low side, $25 billion. And still, commercial, industrial scale fishing, it costs us, human society, it's a loss of $5 billion a year, even though the fish are free. Even though you don't have to own or pay taxes on the ocean. And here we are at this critical point in history. I have seen the change in IUCN so that the ocean is now firmly, solidly on the balance sheet. And it wasn't in the late 1970s. It wasn't into the 80s. There was a commission on whales. But most of life on Earth doesn't have a backbone, the invertebrates. And we've been missing out on that for the Species Survival Commission. We're beginning to get there, but we have to amp it up and realize we have an opportunity that is unprecedented because we have unprecedented knowledge. and an unprecedented opportunity. Will never be as good as a chance we now have. But look, we've got people who remember. We have people here who have the wisdom, not just the years, but the knowledge and that awareness that we have to amp up and speed up and use the knowledge that we've got while there's still time.
Thank you so much. Of course, it's not about crying over our past problems, but we have to learn from them. So I would like to ask Mr. Musa, what are the biggest challenges we are facing today and for the future of IUCN?
Firstly, thank you very much to Ashok for having invited me to this session. It's okay, I think this works. No thank you to Ashok for referring to me as an elder. Give me a break, you know. Still got a few years to go. But you would have noticed by now, Madam Director, that with the elders you can ask them whatever question you want to. They're going to say what they feel like. Whether it has any relevance to your question or not, and I'm sure you've worked that out by now, but that's how it works with the elderly people next to